So the question is, are you overwhelmed and maybe confused on what exact plugins you should be using on your master bus chain? Or maybe you think you know what plugins you should be using, but whenever you make your mixes loud, they end up sounding like crap. If this is you, have no fear. In this video, I'm gonna share with you my straightforward, simple, and straight to the point master bus chain for loud and punchy mixes. Let's dive into it. Man, it is so good to be back. I haven't uploaded in almost a month, which is the longest I've ever gone, I believe, since starting this YouTube channel. And the reason is I'm currently in the process of building a new studio. And I've spent the last month emptying my old studio, which was a lot of work. Now, I'm gonna be sharing the entire process of this new studio build on this channel. So if you're interested in that sort of thing, stay tuned. And in this video, again, we are going to go over my simple master bus chain. Before we begin, I just want to make it clear that you do not need the exact same plugins that I'm using in this video. The plugins you use and the brand that you use really doesn't matter much, even if you're mainly using stock plugins. People get so hung up on this. I have people commenting on my videos all the time asking why I use such old plugins, and the truth is, plugins have been great for a very long time. A good piece of gear is a good piece of gear, whether it's new or old. And knowing your plugins is way more valuable than buying new ones that you don't know how to use. So with that being said, I'm going to play a simple audio sample back for you, and I'm going to share with you every single thing that's going on my master bus in order to get the mix loud, punchy, and master ready. Let's check out the mix. Okay, so as you can hear, the master bus chain makes a massive, massive difference. It makes the mix sound more like a pro record, at least in my opinion. Here's the problem. If there's one area that I see people making a mistake in when it comes to mixing, it's definitely the processing that's going on their master bus. I actually find that people tend to under-process vocals and over-process their mastering chain, either by using way too many plugins or by trying to do way too much within one instance of one of the plugins on their master bus chain. And you're gonna learn in this video that I don't really process all too much within one of these plugins, or at least within one instance of these plugins. It's the net effect of how they all work together that produces the results. So the first plugin in my master bus chain that I almost always use is a simple bus compressor. And for me, I'm not looking to compress the living crap out of my mix. Only a few dB of gain reduction. And as a matter of fact, if I were to bypass the bus compressor as the audio plays back, you won't really hear much of a difference. Maybe a little bit of glue will disappear, but the mix will sound pretty similar. Let's check this out. So my goal here is to just compress the mix by a few dB, maybe 2 to 4. If you're feeling crazy, maybe you can go up to 6 or 8. There really are no rules, as long as you're not trying to do everything within your master bus compressor. In my opinion, a little bit goes a long way. And I prefer a low ratio, slow attack, and either an auto release or a quick release for nice transparent results. Okay, the next one is a big one. Number 2 in my chain is a tape saturator and or clipper. Now right here, I'm using the PSP Vintage Warmer 2, which is a very old plugin, and it's marketed as a tape saturator, which it is. It adds nice harmonic distortion, but in reality, it acts more like a clipper. So my goal here is to add some subtle harmonic saturation to the mix, as well as limit a little bit, just half a dB, maybe a dB of transient on the mix as a whole. So again, I'm gonna play the mix back and look at how much gain reduction is taking place in this plugin. So as you can hear when I bypass the plugin, it's almost like the mix sounds a little less controlled, a little more unruly, and a little more sterile because I am eliminating some of the saturation when I bypass the plugin. But for me, the big takeaway is again, lopping off transient ever so slightly in addition to the bus compressor to help control my mix and make the processes that's coming up next not have to work as hard. And that's the secret. All right, the next plugin in the chain is an EQ. And again, this is where people seem to get into trouble. They try to overly EQ their mix when they should really be getting the mix right in the first place. For me, if I have to make any more than a few dB cut within a specific frequency response range, I tend to go back to the mix and just fix the mix. This is probably the most you really ever see me doing when I mix a track. Now right here in this EQ, I'm pulling out a little bit at around 100 Hertz, a little bit at around 135 Hertz, and a little bit of a dip at around 1.5K. So if I were to bypass this EQ, you'll hear just how much of an effect this EQ is having on the mix as a whole. So as you can hear, nothing earth-shattering. It's just cleaning up a little bit of the buildup that I heard in those two ranges, the upper part of the low end, as well as the upper mids. And that's about it. If I have to go in there and do anything drastic, my mix is not good. And again, this is a good example of just how much EQ I typically would do at the most within one of my mixes. And I recommend you trying something similar with your own mixes. It's a good habit to get into, and it really will streamline the mastering process when it's time to master. All right, up next in my chain is a simple multiband compressor. And this multiband compressor is not doing much. My main goal here is to just, again, reduce a little bit more dynamic range, but because I'm using a multiband compressor, I have separate bands that are all reacting independent of one another. The idea here is because of this, the compression is even more transparent than the original bus compressor. So even though I'm adding a decent amount of compression throughout the mix, the two different styles of compression result in a more transparent sound on my two bus. And not much gain reduction should be happening in this compressor. Let's take a look. Around 2 or 3 dB within each of the bands, not much at all. It's just there to catch any stray, maybe excess low end on a floor tom, or maybe the kick, snare, guitar chug, and a vocal scream all happens at the same time. It's just a precautionary level of compression that sounds nice and transparent, but it's not doing a whole lot. Now, finally, at the end of my master bus chain, I have a limiter. Now remember, this track is not currently mastered. This is before the mastering process, and this might surprise you. For me, when I have a limiter at the end of my master bus chain during the mixing process, it's there just to catch any stray peaks. If I see any amount of consistent gain reduction happening in this particular limiter, I reduce the output of one of the plugins that are happening before it. My goal here is to just make the mix louder for when I send to clients. But if I've done my job right, the limiter shouldn't really be doing anything outside of boosting the track. Again, if I see consistent gain reduction outside of maybe a stray peak here or there, something ain't right. So let's see what's going on in this ancient L1 limiter, which is still a great limiter in my opinion. Okay, so if you were paying close attention, the only time it kicked into gain reduction was on the floor tom. There was a tiny bit of gain reduction happening in the middle of the chorus, but nothing consistent. What I'm trying to avoid is this. Take a look. I don't want that. I don't want to see gain reduction happening in my limiter. I leave that for the mastering process. And here's the good news. If you follow exactly what I've shared in this video, it will be a breeze when you sit down to master because your mix will be nice and in control. You won't have any stray peaks that are completely clipping your mix. You'll have this nice controlled musical file that you can easily master. And that's the way I like to approach it. And again, please do not obsess about the plugins that I'm using. I've been getting that a lot on my channel, and it's unfortunate because people have the wrong mentality. I think people are just brainwashed by plugin companies. Yes, I will buy new plugins from time to time if I want to experiment with something new, but if you can't mix a great sounding track with basic EQ, compression, maybe saturation, and limiting, all the basic tools, then unfortunately, the plugins aren't the problem. It's your approach and your system that's the problem. I want you producing pro sounding music with the tools that you're currently using. And to help you out, I'm offering you direct access for absolutely free right now to my exclusive training, 4 dead simple ways to massively improve your recordings and mixes. In this free training, I share my #1 technique for prepping heavy guitar tracks that virtually mix themselves. You'll also learn how to create instantaneous clarity within your mix using any old stock EQ plugin. You'll also learn how to take control over the levels in your mix so instruments stop fighting with each other within your productions. And finally, you'll learn how to craft radio-ready vocal mixes using only stock plugins within your DAW. Now, a word of warning, if you have the attention span of a squirrel, don't waste your time and don't even bother watching this training. It's almost an hour long and is meant for people who are serious and willing to put in the work to produce truly professional results with their music. If you're one of these people that just wants to constantly buy new plugins and blame gear for the results that you're currently getting, again, this training isn't for you. Again, you can access this training for absolutely free right now, and there's a link below in this video's description. So I'm curious to know, what did you think of my master bus chain? Leave a comment below this video. I'd love to hear your opinion and what you've been up to in your home studio. And until next time, drink that Spindrift.